I'm really excited for this session today, talking about, I know it's interesting that neuroradiology has actually been the first starting point for real AI adoption in recent years, with solutions across acute care and stroke and other type of brain disease like MS. And I'm curious to hear our esteemed speakers talking about how it evolved within their institution. I think we have speakers that have a lot of experience with AI. So both the evolution within the enterprise, how starting from one algorithm to expand to multiple solutions, as well as how it evolved with interacting with other clinicians within the health system. So indeed, to get us started, let's start with quick introductions. And Dr. Lee, we'll start with you. I'd love if you can say a few words.
Yes, good morning. I'm Roland Lee. I'm the Chief of Neuroradiology at the University of California, San Diego, and the Veterans Hospital in San Diego.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Dr. Maya.
Good morning, everybody. Marcel Maya. I'm a neuroradiologist at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, also co-chair of the Department of Imaging.
And Professor Konen.
Eli Konen, the head of Radiology department in Sheba Medical Center, Tel Aviv, Israel.
Thank you, everybody. So we'll start, maybe Dr. Lee, I'll start with you. You've been utilizing AI for about 18 months, maybe even a bit more. And I'm curious if you can share some of the lessons learned on the neuroradiology side on how to utilize AI and what are the value points.
Okay, as the title of this talk, we're at a major medical center. So we have residents and fellows, as well as faculty, in particular, in this case, neuroradiology. In particular, I'm going to be addressing the head CT algorithm. The head CTs, all non-conscious head CTs are fed through the Aidoc algorithm to look for intracranial hemorrhage. In our experience, we think the algorithm is pretty good. We use it uniformly for all of our non-conscious head CTs at UCSD. And so we find that there are, importantly, there are few false positives. Few false negatives. When they find a bleed, they're generally, there may be false positives, but they usually don't miss any bleeds. But they're quite good at picking up more subtle bleeds. I think it's especially valuable for the trainees, because they don't have as much experience looking at this. And of course, they rotate on multiple different rotations, not only neuro. And so they're not as attuned and they don't have as much experience. So it is helpful for them, and especially at night. So at night, from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., our trainees are alone, and they're also doing not just neuro, but everything else. They're looking for pulmonary emboli, they're doing obstetric ultrasound. And so they're kind of pressed for time and covering, as a primary reader for all sorts of modalities. They find it very helpful. During the day, it's very helpful to organize the work list. So we come in the morning, there'll be maybe 25 unread studies. There'll be some preliminaries there by the trainees overnight, but I just look at ADOC in the morning and I just go through the ADOC positives first. Because out of 25, there may only be like 6 or 7 positives at our institution. And so I can quickly go through those. The ones that are false positives, no problem. But the true positives, I'll dictate those first. And what's also helpful, I think, is that I keep it on during the day. So as I'm working through the list, dictating the cases, reviewing the case with the resident in the morning, working through the list of 25, I've already now first looked at the positives. As new positives come up, there will be a little bell that rings and the name will appear in the corner. So then I can, look at the read and interrupt the read just for a second, look at the case they bring up. If it's true, then I might attend to that right away, or the next case. So it's really good way to help me organize the work list in the morning and during the day to make sure I prioritize the positive cases first. So in summary, I think that's how we use it at UCSD.
It's very interesting, and Dr. Lee, to me this is fascinating, because a lot of people, when they think about AI, they kind of think about this box you're giving to somebody, and they'll they'll figure out how to use it. But what I love about what you said is that you highlighted those different specific use cases. So you have some users that need this, especially during the night, or for trainees, or for triaging in the morning, or throughout the day. And I think that highlighting those specific practical use cases of how you integrate into clinical workflow is really key. Because when people talk about workflow integration, I find that they oftentimes talk about system integration, IT integration. What I find is more fascinating is the workflow integration, how it really integrates into your day-to-day. And I think those are extremely valuable insights. Dr. Maya, you've started using the intracranial hemorrhage, but actually expanded the solution. You started using the stroke solution for large vessel occlusion as well, and then cervical spine fractures. Anything you can share about the expansion of AI and how it is to add more use cases and evolve how AI is being used in the department?
Thanks a lot. And you're right. We started early back in 2017, adopting Aidoc and other applications in the clinical realm. And intracranial hemorrhage was the first one. And we quickly moved on to cervical fractures, pulmonary embolism detection, and large vessel occlusion. The key was for us to be convinced of, number one, of the importance of adopting these. Number two, having the follow-up and physician champions in the adoption. And most importantly, having a good partner in terms of making it work. A lot has been said about workflow integration, but I can't overemphasize how important it is that this thing works within the workflow of reading. Because even if you have the best system available and it's perfect, not even 0% miss rate, if it's not integrated in your workflow properly, it's not going to be helpful. And the solutions that we had working with Aidoc and other companies as well was very natural and fit into our packs and reading patterns. One example I might add is you gave the example of different types of users using it differently. The experience attending a radiologist use it differently in terms of speeding up their reads rather than relying on Aidoc, but honing on the abnormality and kind of speeding it up. And you can imagine the efficiencies that are achieved that way as well. So those are some of the things that we paid attention to.
Professor Konen, you've seen the AI adoption both in your department, but as the ecosystem, I know you've been involved with companies from the early days. So anything you can share from the chair's perspective on AI adoption across the enterprise and how you see it evolving?
Yeah, so in relation to what Dr. Lee said, we have a very busy emergency room, about 70 to 100 AtE every night shift. And we have sometimes one or two residents staying and giving the first preliminary reports. And Aidoc we found it to be very helpful specifically for the night shift. But not only, usually residents or young radiologists or young people adopt new techniques very fast. They are early adopters. And in this case, I can say that even our older staff was early adopter very early in the introduction of Aidoc. We had previous softwares, but this one was introduced to us very seamless. The installation was very seamless, zero footprint technique. It doesn't change any detail in our workflow. It was said here already, I won't repeat it. And I think it's part of the key success of Aidoc in our department. It is very well adopted. It was so surprising for me even, and in the mind, it is already part of the normal radiologist workflow. Later, you can see that the head of radiology in our department, Professor Chen Hoffman, is sometimes calling you and knowing that it was shut down for 1 hour or 2 hours and say, where is the Aidoc? Because it's, as he says, it's a reassuring additional tool for when he finalizes and confirms the report. And this is a very, very experienced neuroradiologist. So I think it says it all for the success.
First of all, I find all of these perspectives really fascinating because, and I think this is what hopefully is helpful to the listeners, because understanding the practical and day-to-day experience of the AI adoption, I think is really key. There is another topic that I wanted to broach today, which is more regarding the evolution of AI. And I think that these days we're looking at AI as taking a standard role in the day-to-day for radiology. But the question is, how is it going to evolve? How is it going to evolve over time? And especially as there are other ologies also starting to bring in AI relevant to imaging. The question is, what is the role that radiologists should take? And Dr. Mai, I want to start maybe with you for this one. We spoke about this in the past, and we believe that AI is here to elevate the influence that radiologists have on the whole care continuum based on AI. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts about how the role of radiologists is going to evolve.
I think this is a very important topic, and I think radiologists as a community, as a profession, they're past the point of being scared and afraid of AI having to replace them. And they are at the best position to adopt and move AI forward. However, a chronic problem arises, and that's been the problem of radiology, that we have not been able to sometimes tout our own successes and advance our causes in fields that naturally we've been developing and we've been working on, and they've been co-opted by other specialties. And that's part of the competition. We don't want to fall back on this one. We have to look at it as a way of investing in the field. And many people are, of course, concerned about the costs involved, and there are additional costs in the background of diminishing reimbursements. But this is not an issue of reimbursement. It's more an issue of looking at it as a cost of really doing business. Because this is where it's going at, and we have to be at the forefront of these. To that end, we must invest in research, and we must be committed in developing these and adopting into our clinical practices.
I wholeheartedly agree with that message. Dr. Lee, I'm curious to hear your perspective on this topic and in general about the role of radiologists evolving with AI.
Yes, I'd like to address in particular the issue of AI replacing radiologists. I think that's patently false. We see this as radiology because we're commonly the cutting edge in many different kinds of advanced technologies. We hear this all the time. And each time it just, all it does is show that there's so much demand for radiologists that we need these tools. We're hurting ourselves by not having these tools, but the tools do not replace us. But we need to have more help. If we can't have more bodies, which it's hard to do because the demand is so high, we need to have more tools to help us. And Aidoc is just another example of a tool to help us be able to read more efficiently and accurately and quickly the head CTs, for example.
Absolutely. Professor Konen, I'm curious to hear your perspective on this topic, especially as you looked at the AI evolution over time. So where do you think this is going to take and how it's going to impact radiologists?
Yeah, so first, I totally agree with Dr. Maya and Dr. Lee's words. And I want to give a little bit an additional perspective for what is happening and with the AI and radiology. Perhaps the next example will say everything. It's residents. I'm interviewing each few months residency candidates. And I think 4 or 5 years ago, when we were at the top of the hype of the AI and some articles and papers saying that it might replace radiologists soon. Some of them came and expressed some concern about the choosing radiology because it might be replaced. They might be replaced in the future. Blah blah blah. AI and so on. I think the last 3 years, I have more candidates because they are attracted to radiology because of the AI. So I think the future, what is going now is not the full, it's not the full way to should go with AI and radiology, because radiology, we are not actually analyzing, radiologists are physicians, are not, we are not analyzing really only pixels. We are not pixel technicians and or pixel analyzers. We are physicians. We read the report, we look at the pathology, we look at the clinical findings, we call our colleagues to ask more questions, and then we get an idea of what's happening in the picture. And I think that that's the way AI should go, and you as a company, leading company, should also go to not to deal only with radiomics, but to combine it with pathology findings. And we have already some projects in our hospital that are combining AI with the pathological pictures, because pathology is getting in many centers today being totally digitalized. And our pathology is full digital today in our center. And so it's easier now to work together and to do the research together on the cases that are going on.
I want to ask for any closing remarks from our esteemed speakers. Dr. Maya, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I think it's important to recognize that AI is a big term, and there are so many different AI applications, and recognition of images is just one bit. AI is everywhere in our field, from protocoling, from processing, etc. But vis-a-vis the image recognition, image aid, I think it's important to really be picking products that suit your need and partner with companies that are capable of delivering what they claim to deliver. And that's very important.
Yeah, great point. Dr. Lee, any closing remarks?
Yes, we're very pleased with the with our ADOC partners. We like the product, but I emphasize not just with AI, but anything with MRI vendors or CT. The company itself is important. The people that you interface with, the equipment is just software, hardware. But one thing I found very beneficial about working with ADOC is I have complete access to your team of people. There's certain members of your team. I hope it's okay to mention Shuli, for example. I just call her. Just call her anytime there's an issue, anytime there's a question, anytime there's a compliment. I just give her a call. And right away, I have a very good accessibility to her and also to Elad. So I think that's one advantage of this company. You're at the correct size. You're very accessible.
And Professor Konen?
What you did is to show to bring it to us with a lot of humbleness. And not not promise things that are not there, because the development of each application is very difficult, takes a long time consuming and a lot of efforts. I know it from the private experience. So we all have to expect that every year we get a little bit more and more and more advanced. It's nothing like what was promised or was expected like 5 years ago, that within 5 or 10 years, the radiologists will be replaced. We are far, far away from there. And so continue the good work, and we will be happy to continue to be your partners.
It's interesting. I wholeheartedly agree. There is one comment there that really resonated. Developing an AI solution for a new disease is not like you developed a neural network to detect cats and now you're running dogs data. Okay, now I'm detecting dogs. The next time I'll detect airplanes. It's a whole disease state, and you have to understand the depth of the workflow and what clinical parameters. And it is somewhat generalizable, but there is a lot to specialize in. And I wholeheartedly agree. I think that's the approach, is one by one, doing it in depth and with a lot of focusing a lot on the value and the disease state. Good. So Ariella, maybe let's take some questions from the audience. I see we have a lot.
Yes, So first of all, thank you to all the panelists. The 30 minutes just flew by, really. I appreciate your time. And there have been questions, and Dr. Meyer's been answering them. So maybe I'll raise the, so one of the questions was about residents, right? Can it be used as a recruiting tool? I think Dr. Konen mentioned residents. You're mentioning residents as well. Maybe a question about that. I think that's sort of the future. So Dr. Meyer, you answered absolutely. Maybe you want to say a few words more about residents, and then let maybe the other panelists would like to share as well.
No, I think the residents are very interested in AI and how we use it in our daily workflow and what the research opportunities are. And that conversation goes on at the interview session before we select them and after they join us. And I think it's a big positive for them to be working with AI in their studies. Absolutely.
Dr. Konen, do you want to add anything, or?
No, just for residents, it's a wonderful field, potential field for research. And we integrate every resident that is accepted for the department in several research projects. Most of them now are on an AI, and this is a very attractive point for many residents. Very high quality residents, very talented. Really, the generation that we get today is much more clever than us, my generation, I think. I wouldn't be accepted for my department today, I think.
It's a very humble comment, Dr. Konen. Another question that came up, and Dr. Meyer, you started answering, if you don't mind also repeating that, I guess, for the people who are not reading the answers. What's the biggest challenge in developing AI tools for radiologists? So you started addressing that. Maybe you can take it.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And I think radiologists, of course, are smart. And number one, they want to be convinced of the value of the product. And number two, it has to be easy on them. It shouldn't make life more difficult and more complicated as is. They're dealing with a lot of studies at an increasing rate. So if it makes life easier and if they see the value, they will adopt it.
Any other thoughts on this?
I agree. Well stated.
And so maybe one last question, and again, Dr. Meyer started, you were asking about, there's a question about skeptics, right, within departments, and were you able to, sort of, how did you overcome skeptics?
I'll be honest, there were not too many skeptics. It wasn't like the structured reporting templates that we introduced many years ago, where everybody had to change from pre-dictation to templates where there was a war going on. This is something that people could ignore and just continue to do their work. But a few people were skeptics, and they were easily convinced once they saw with their own eyes the value of it.
Any other thoughts from our other panelists on this?
I don't think there were any skeptics. I mean, it's the program is right there. There's a little orange box in the corner, and you just linger on it, and the things will pop up. So you can see the images. You can see immediately if the ones that are the streak artifact, the ones that are hemorrhages, and you can see the results are very good. And again, you don't have to use the box. You don't have to look at the box if you don't want to. But I don't think there are any skeptics. It's not intrusive, and it's valuable.
I think the more important question is not so much the departmental members' skepticism, but to convince the payers and the department, the people who pony up the money, to convince them why this needs to be done. And that's where leadership comes in, and that's where you have to prove it. And that's at that level you have some challenges.
Yeah, and that's exactly one of the questions that has come up, and I'm happy you brought that up. And you mentioned it, Dr. Meyer, as well, that the question is AI viewed as an imaging department solution, or is it viewed as sort of a broader institution implication? And maybe just a few words on that. I think you did mention that it is.
And I think when we did that, obviously we're not getting extra cents or dollars when we use AI or Aidoc or any other product. So, and we still don't get it. There's some new codes about the stroke, but that's really negligible. So we pitched it all on the basis of quality and high-level patient care. And that's, if you go from that perspective and you make your points clearly, I think you'll have success.
Any thoughts on that? And I think this will sort of be our closing point. How engaged is the hospital administration, right, in implementing AI, and is it viewed as something that can provide value beyond maybe just the department? I guess Professor Konen or Dr. Lee.
I think that we were one of the first centers to give some pictures to Elad in the beginning, and some exams, and we started very early to work together from early stages. For the hospital management, it is a point of pride. We are proud, and it is in every advertisement and in our research units and everything. We mention Aidoc as a point of excellence and a project of excellence, and it's part of our pride to be partners with Aidoc, Sheba and Aidoc. So the management point of view is very positive. And regarding I think your previous question, skepticism is a question for 5 years ago, not anymore for any radiologist. And if somebody doesn't want to use it, it's there. Don't use it. My way of managing people is not to tell them to do things. They have to adapt it by themselves and feel that it's good for them. And it works very fine. Actually, with Aidoc, we had the opposite problem. You give to one, everybody in the room wants it immediately on the screen after 2 or 3 days. So there was, as a manager, where sometimes I have to push some projects and new softwares. And again, don't annoy us with this. We have enough work, you know, you with your ideas. It was the opposite with Aidoc. So.
Thank you.
Yes, at our institution, you know, I think as Dr. Meyer said, this is just the cost of doing business. So this is funded by our department, our chairman, Dr. Norbash, you know, who's a neuroradiologist, you know, agreed it was useful. You know, also we have other modules like the pulmonary embolist, which is very, the chest people really like it. Chest chief really likes that. But, you know, our chairman just said, well, you know, this is a valuable product, and it's, you know, we should have it. And so, you know, it's just like other products that we use, you know, in our jobs.
So thank you very much. So we have, let's say 5 more minutes, but I want to be able to be cautious of your times. Any parting thoughts before we sort of say goodbye to everyone who was listening, and to you as well?
I think as much as stuff is coming out from different companies, different products, and at the last RSNA that I visited in person, there were 300 or so companies. We still are barely making a dent into the whole scope of things that we could. So there is a lot of work to be done, not just by Aidoc, but other companies as well. So all the power to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you, our esteemed panelists. It was a pleasure. Really, time flew. I can't believe it's been almost 45 minutes. So thank you very, very much. And to those of you who are live on this, we will be sharing a recording of email, but this will also be aired at ASNR next week. So thank you, everyone, for joining us online, and for our panelists. And I wish you all a great day, evening, and be safe for the rest of the day. Thank you, and
thank
goodbye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.